All right, so again, welcome to our nonprofit information session. We're so grateful to have you all here and for your interest. Um, we are recording this session and we'll share the recording with you afterwards, as well as any answers to your questions or further detail that might be helpful to you as you access the grant application. And we hope that you will apply and be motivated to do so as you learn more. And so we promise to be in touch and make sure you have everything that you need to be as successful as possible in navigating our process. All right, so again, I'm Jennifer Avers. I represent our nonprofit outreach committee, and I have some colleagues with me today who you will be hearing from as well. Let me also ask you, actually, I apologize, I'm moving ahead too fast. Here we go, and everyone can see my screen? All right, we're good, okay. Impact 100 Garden State operates through a working board, which we call our leadership team. We're organized by committees with members volunteering in various functions. So in addition to hearing from me, you'll hear from Louise Murray with our Grant Operations Committee. And this committee is responsible for developing the grant application, training our members to review and evaluate those applications, selecting finalists for our membership's vote, and then supporting those finalists to develop their presentations for the membership vote. You'll also hear from Betty Schultz, who works with our grant administration team. She is a co-chair along with Lori Wilson. When nonprofits receive awards, grant administration works closely with the grantees to disperse funds over the determined time frame, which, as you'll hear again and again throughout today, could be a 1 to 3 year time frame for disbursement of those funds. And grant administration works very closely with the award recipients to support achievement of agreed upon milestones and also promote grant recipients' efforts and accomplishments. We'll also hear from our financial review committee, and today our FRC is represented by Mary Jane Robertson, who also serves as our treasurer, among wearing many other hats for Impact 100 Garden State over the years. And the FRC reviews applicants' required financials to ensure that our nonprofit finalists up for our members' consideration have that financial capacity to steward our collective funds. So now you've learned a bit about us and how we're structured. We'd like to learn from you about whether or not you've applied in the past, just to kind of get a sense of who's returning and who may be new. So I'm just going to launch this poll and ask that you respond, and we'll see who's here. Has your organization applied in the past? Lots of yeses. All right. Well, thank you for returning. Thank you for coming back to us to learn more and for us to learn more from you about all of the important work that you're doing within your organizations. And for those who have not applied, we've got 34%, a little more here coming in, who have not applied before. So thank you for taking time to learn more about us and our process. All right, I appreciate that. Thanks, everyone. Okay. Right. Let me get out of here. Okay. We've organized our time today into two parts. First, an overview of who we are, what we fund, and how we fund. And then we'll review the application process in detail, take a look at that 2022 application together. And there have been changes made from 2021. So if you applied in the past, you will see that we've worked together to reduce the number of questions being asked, as well as made some other changes really to emphasize what our review team needs to see. And also our hope is that it'll be less onerous on all of you who spend so much time preparing your requests for us. So you'll hear about that. As always, we look forward to feedback about how we can improve our process in the application. And in fact, we also want to thank the applicants from 2021 who provided feedback to us in our first ever applicant survey. And just want you to know that if you have questions, not only about the process, but your experience of the process, Nonprofit Outreach is very interested in hearing from you. And you can reach us at grants@impact100gardenstate.org at any time, at any time. So we encourage you to reach out. Our hope for today is that you walk away with a better understanding of our eligibility requirements, our priorities, and the nuts and bolts of how to apply for an Impact 100 Garden State grant. The impact concept is the power of one multiplied by many, and each year our members' donations of $1,000 each are pooled to award high impact grants of $100,000 to nonprofits selected through our rigorous review process as well as democratic voting process. Members actively participate in this process, and every member has a vote on how our collective contributions will be used annually. 100% of those $1,000 contributions go towards the grants that are awarded to our recipients. We're also grateful to our members and sponsors who make gifts beyond that to support our modest operating expenses, which include the use of the Community Foundation of New Jersey. They serve as our back office as we operate as a donor-advised fund. There are 65 impact chapters around the world, awarding over 90 million since the impact model's inception in 2001. And since our Garden State founding in 2013, we have awarded over $2.4 million in grants. And in 2021, we were so pleased to be able to award 3 $100,000 grants, as well as 7 merit grants of $8,000 each. Our funds have been invested to support those experiencing homelessness, nonprofits addressing food insecurity, agencies supporting children and youth, those youth aging out of the foster care system, our veterans, arts and music programs, and we are so pleased to see the funds and that ripple effect. And we're hopeful that we'll hear from agencies reaching a number of our focus areas. And we also make a particular plug for those working in the environmental and sustainability area. And again, you'll hear more from us about kind of our areas of focus, but we encourage those organizations who do meet our requirements to share your dreams with us and how you might use a transformative grant from Impact 100 Garden State. I also want to share that at this point, more people joining us, here we go. We don't know how many members we will have for this 2022 cycle. We have a sense, we have projections, we have hopes, but for that reason, we aren't able to say what that pool of funds looks like for that February kind of total amount of funding. We're currently at 356 members and are hopeful that many have renewed and more will renew. And certainly if you're interested in becoming a member or know of others who may, that just contributes to that overall pool of funding that we will allocate in February 2022. All right. So we were founded with the mission to provide transformational funds to organizations that reach underserved populations, to raise the profile of those that are deserving but lesser known, and to highlight unmet needs in our 5 focus areas. We strive to meaningfully engage women in philanthropy, provide opportunities for our members to learn more from nonprofits and about nonprofits, and the needs and assets within our targeted counties. And we also seek ways to provide opportunities for nonprofits to connect with our civically engaged members. So that relationship between member and nonprofit is highly valued and a priority for us. Okay. We also want you to know that we take our ethical principles very seriously. Our leadership team and grant review team sign non-disclosure agreements. And so this ensures that the information that you share with us is in the review process is kept in confidence, and that only those reviewing particular applications have access to those full application package. And we also ensure that if any of our members have an individual relationship with an applicant, that they recuse themselves from reviewing and rating those applications. So that may be a member who serves on a nonprofit board, who has made donations to a nonprofit in the past or volunteered, and would be concerned that there may be bias. And so we do our best to prevent that, and we make that very clear throughout our member trainings and in terms of how we operate our fund. We also have a really strict communications policy where we only highlight active grant recipients. So for example, we have an education session. I also want to let you all know on November 10th, the public is invited to this, as well as our members, where members will learn from 3 of our active grant recipients, Norwest Cap, Union County Economic Development Corporation, and the County College of Morris Dover Promise. And so we're excited to hear from them. And also the policy is clear that we don't feature closed grant recipients who may reapply for funds. And again, our goal is to make sure that members are not biased as they make those voting decisions. So again, we take that really seriously. All right. So let's get into eligibility and what we need to see from applicants in order to be considered for those large grants. To be eligible, organizations, the proposals that are considered must serve at least one of our 5 targeted counties of Morris, Passaic, Somerset, Sussex, or Union. They need to be for new programs or an expansion or amplification of an existing program. Requests may include making necessary improvements to infrastructure to support new or expanding programs. Requests may fund capital expenditures or equipment that are integral to that new program or expansion. And again, we really like to see how that request is tied to either adding services, reaching more people, or doing something new to serve your communities in innovative, transformative ways. But do want you to know that costs like construction, vehicles, and technology perhaps needed due to COVID are considered within that clear program request, are acceptable, I should say. Joint programs are also eligible, and we define joint as including a lead organization and a partner organization, and Louise will speak to this a bit more as we go through the application together. The lead and partner organizations work together to implement the proposed program in this case, and with a joint program, we disperse grant checks to 2 organizations. And therefore, all of the financials required from the lead organization are also required from that partner organization. We also accept applications for programs involving collaborations where only one nonprofit applies for funds and may allocate portions of the grant to other collaborating nonprofit entities or contractors. And thus the applicant serves as a fiscal agent dispersing the grant to those collaborating or contracted to execute the program. In those cases, we likely won't need financials from your collaborators, but we do need to know about those relationships. And again, Louise will talk to this a bit more in terms of agreements, memorandums of understanding and such. All right. We will not fund debt reduction, interim or bridge fund finances, endowment funding, or private foundations. Garden State does not fund general operating expenses, so any funding requests must be directly tied to that proposed new project or expanded program. Program-related expenses such as staff salaries, rent, and other supplies are certainly eligible. We just won't fund those recurring costs for the entire organization or the whole organization. We would like to see that your budget lines, we need to see that your budget lines tie to that program request directly. Our chapter does not consider any programs that are political, partisan, or religious in nature. This doesn't mean that we won't consider requests from churches providing services, nor does it mean we wouldn't consider requests from nonpartisan groups doing civic engagement work in one of our grant categories. We just need to be sure that your request is open to all and participation does not require affiliation of any sort. Applicants must be classified as 501c3s, and we need reviewed and audited financials and Form 990s regardless of your annual gross revenues. And we ask that our recipients sign agreements if chosen for the award. Please know that if you're awarded a grant, and Betty will speak to this a bit more later, you will not receive the $100,000 grant up front, but this is an ongoing relationship with benchmarks for disbursements over your defined period of the requested program. Okay. So, and this is a little bit new this year for those who have come to us in the past, we still have priorities to fund within 5 focus areas. And these areas are arts and culture, children and families, education, environment preservation or recreation, and health and wellness. And I'm going to read our definitions for each of these, and they're really quite broad. These are our categories, our priorities. That said, in the past, we have asked applicants to identify one focus area in which their request falls. This season, we ask only that you certify that your request falls in at least one of these focus areas. So this is also in response to what we're learning as grant review teams and what we've heard from applicants in the past, that it's somewhat difficult to always choose a particular focus area. And so we want you to know that this year there's that change where we just need to make sure that your request falls in one or more of these buckets, if you will. So let me just talk through these buckets for you, and you can find this information also on our grants web pages. For arts and culture, we define this as programs that develop, cultivate, or enhance the cultural and artistic climate. For children and families, we define as programs that strengthen or enhance the lives of children and families. For education, we define this as programs that advance or improve learning opportunities for children and/or adults. Under environment, preservation, and recreation, programs that restore, conserve, or improve natural surroundings and resources, including for recreational use, improve the welfare of animals, preserve buildings and structures, or support research, public awareness, or education relating to the environment. So that's a big bucket. Health and wellness, programs that improve the physical and/or mental well-being of people. Right. And now I will pass the baton to Betty Schultz, who will speak to our grant process.
Thanks so much, Jennifer. And it's just delightful to be here with so many people today. As Jennifer mentioned initially, I am the co-chair of the Grant Administration Committee, and I also serve on a number of other impact committees. And what I'd like to do in this segment of the program is first give you a high-level overview of our process this year. For those of you who have applied in the past, it will probably look familiar, but it will show you the key dates for this year. And then I'll go into each of the boxes that you see here and give you a little bit more information on each of those. And to begin, the process begins with our application. And note, the deadline for our application this year is February 4th of 2022. Then in February and March, our grant review committees will convene and review the applications that have been submitted. And at the same time and into April, our financial review committees will review the financial information that is submitted with the applications. And then our site visits next year will be completed in April for those applications that the grant review committees and the financial review committee deem are worthy of moving forward with the process. And then finalists are selected towards the end of April into May. And our annual award meeting this year, where the recipients will be announced, is June 9th. And then those recipients will work with the Grant Administration Committee for the time their grant program is active. So I'll take you through each of these in a little bit more detail. The application, as I mentioned, the application is due February 4th at 5 p.m. And I would encourage you to get your applications in earlier, not right at 5 o'clock. If some glitch happens and you have a problem and it's 5:01, your application will not be accepted. So please bear that in mind. And also, please stick to what's in the requirements in the application. Do not submit extra promotional materials. They will not be reviewed. And we also highly recommend you use the Save Progress as you go through the online application to make sure that you don't lose any work that you've submitted in the application. Following the close of the applications, our grant review committees are convened, and each of those members is trained in our grant review process. We have a number of committees, but they're all trained to review the applications in a similar manner, so there's consistency and fairness across the committees. And excuse me, the evaluation guidelines that our members utilize really mirror the application, and there's a rubric that's used to aid in that evaluation process. And once the review committees select applications that they believe are very strong and worthy of continuing with into the next step in the process, they are sent to the Financial Review Committee. And those applications that won't be moving forward will be notified in mid-April. The Financial Review Committee then looks at all the submitted financial information to ensure that the applicant is strong financially and can absorb a grant of the size where we would be awarding. If there are any questions about the information that was submitted, they will reach out to the financial contact that you include in your application. And the approved applications are then returned to the grant review committees, and they will decide which of the candidates to select for site visits. And applicants will be notified in mid-April if whether or not they have been selected for a site visit. The site visits generally are about 2 hours in length. They will occur this year in April. And there's a number of objectives of those site visits. First, it's for the grant review team members to get to know the organization, the program manager, the organization leadership, to really understand your organization. And it's also to review any outstanding questions that have come up during the review process about the program, the financials, and these questions are sent to the organizations in advance of the site visit, so you know what the topics are that will be discussed. And of course, one of the purposes of the site visits is to complete due diligence as good stewards of our members' funds. And following the site visits, the grant review committees will reconvene and discuss the results of the site visits, and they will select which organizations will be put forward to the full membership as finalists. The finalists will be notified, and the grant review committees will work with them on videos that will be presented to and available to the full membership, to summaries of their programs, and to their wish lists. Once those are completed, all of our members will receive the video, the narrative summaries, the wish lists, and each member is eligible to vote electronically for the finalists that they wish to receive a grant. And the votes are tallied prior to our annual awards meeting. And this is done by a volunteer accounting firm who is independent from Impact 100 Garden State. And then we get to our annual awards meeting, which is where the grant recipients for the 2022 grant cycle will be announced. This meeting will be held on June 9th. And we would ask that each of the recipients give an acceptance speech. And we don't know yet. We are hoping that our awards meeting could be in person again this year. It's been virtual the last 2 years, but we'll have to see where things are and how comfortable folks feel about meeting in person when we get closer to the meeting. And just a note that the program summaries, the videos, and the wish lists will all be on our website for both the recipients and the finalists, for not only our members to see, but the public to see as well. Then following the awards meeting, the recipients of our grants work with the Grant Administration Committee. And as Jen mentioned, the full grant amount is not released up front. You may have seen pictures on our website of recipients holding these big checks for $100,000, but that's really just for publicity purposes. The funds will be dispersed as they're needed to complete your grant project. And following the awards meeting, the Grant Administration Committee will work with new recipients during June and July to put a grant agreement in place. And each recipient will be assigned a liaison who will work with them and guide them through the process. And included in the grant agreement will be quarterly budgets and quarterly milestones. And we define milestones as key activities, outputs, and outcomes that are really critical to the success of the grant project. And activities generate outputs, which in turn create outcomes. And quarterly milestones will be developed by the grant recipients. And what will be utilized as a starting point are the activities and the outcomes that are included in the grant application. And the recipients will also be asked to spread the budget that was included in their application by quarter for the life of their project. And the Grant Administration liaisons will collaborate with their recipients to ensure that the budgets and the milestones are realistic and achievable, as well as consistent with the application the grant award was based on. Oh, excuse me. So as you will see here, we have awarded grants over what will be our 10th year next year. Over the last 9 years, we've awarded grants to 22 different organizations. And we'd like to point out that some of these recipients applied 2 or even 4 times before receiving an award. So if you've applied before, don't give up. We are very, proud of our recipients. We consider them part of the Impact family. We maintain relationships with them over the years, and many of our members have connected in various ways with our current and past recipients. So thank you for your attention during this point of the process. And if you have any questions or comments, as Jen mentioned, please put them in the chat and we'll get to them at the end of the session and try to answer all of your questions. So I will now turn it over to, let's see, who am I turning it over to?
I think back to me, Betty. Thank you so
Back
much.
to you, Jen. Thank you.
you. And let's see, this PowerPoint's, come on. There we go. All right. And thanks. I am seeing a couple of questions come in to me directly. Feel free to keep them coming as you hear us describe the process and as we get into the nuts and bolts of the application. And I see a question. Yes, Impact 100 Garden State does help those finalists prepare their video presentations for the members to review. And also there's a program narrative. You'll hear a bit more about this too. Our volunteers work very closely. We develop relationships through that grant review process, the site visits to the finalist stage. And yes, there's a team at the nonprofit's disposal to make sure that you are as prepared as possible to share your requests with the larger membership. So I just saw that question come through. Great. Is there any advantage to applying early or do you wait until after the deadline? Great question. We do not review until the deadline. And you'll learn shortly, great segue, that you can work on your proposal now up until February 4th, February 4th, 2022. So there's a way to save your work on your application package as you create your account online, and the earlier you get in, the better. But to your question, we do review everything after that deadline. So thanks for that. Okay. All right. So I want to just make sure you know where to go on our website. We have a lot of information on there. We want to make sure that you can successfully navigate it. So our main page is, of course, that impact100gardenstate.org. And then you'll see that there's a grants tab, which if you're on a desktop, it's going to be to the right top. And under grants, you'll see there's a process and dates tab, an FAQ, an apply, and then a grant recipients page. And we encourage you to take a look at each of those pages. They've got a lot of information there, and they also talk to one another. So if you want to get in and get to the apply page, you should be able to do that from each of the grants pages. We also, and I think Louise and Betty have mentioned this, we want to make sure that you reference the application before you enter information, and I'll show you how you can do that. We'll also share the recording of this session with everyone. And we also want you to know, please reach out to grants@impact100gardenstate.org. That's our nonprofit outreach team. And we'll be sure to respond to you with any questions you have about the process, whether it's tech, whether it's content, whether it's just checking in about our communications. Please don't hesitate to reach out. That's just our easiest channel for getting to the right volunteers to respond to you. All right. So thank you for your patience here. I've got a lot on my screen. I want to make sure I'm saying the right things to you. Okay, so once you're in that grants tab, what you're going to want to do is go to the apply tab once you feel like you have a sense of what's required, and then choose access the grant application. And you'll see that there's one link here for register, login, preview the grant application. And you'll want to go into that, and you'll be brought to this page. And I want to direct your attention to this link to preview the application. You can take a look at it and see the word counts, and Louise will talk you through this a bit some more in a moment, but we definitely encourage you to take a look at that template. We also know that a number of you seasoned applicants have found that it's helpful to copy and paste that application into a Word doc and then complete your responses to check that word count before you go into the live application. All right. The left side here is where you're going to need to register, and whether you've applied in the past or not, you've got to apply again for 2022. Your system may pull up some old IDs and passwords, so you may just need to clear your cache and adjust your web browser so the system recognizes you as a new user, a new registration. And we also recommend, we've been successful with other browsers, but we've had, knock on wood, no issues with Chrome. So we suggest you use Chrome. You'll then create a username, add your email, of course, and enter a password. And then there will be a window that pops up to confirm that you've been registered. And you'll use your email and password here to the right to log in. And again, if you have any challenges with this, feel free to reach out to grants@100gardenstate.org. All right, so now we're getting into the good stuff, and I'll hand it over to my colleague. Oh, I'm sorry, not yet. Bear with me, just one more before you get Louise here, stuck with Jen a little longer. We just want to make sure, again, there have been changes for 2022. So in the past, if you've applied, your program narrative, that proposal request was a separate narrative attachment. It was a PDF. That is not the case this year, and we hope that you will like this new structure where kind of the general information about you, contacts, and your organization background, as well as that program narrative, your actual request is all in one place online, and data fill entry all in one place. So you're not going to have a separate narrative attachment. You will still have to attach financials and your board list, and we'll talk about this in more detail, but this is the general overview of the 2022 application. And now I'll pass it over to Louise.
Okay. Well, thank you, Jennifer. And, thank you to all of the nonprofits who are interested in working with us at Impact 100 Garden State. If we were in person, I'm mindful that we've been hearing a lot of information in the past 45 minutes, and that I might invite everyone to stand up and take a stretch, because my remarks are going to be quite somewhat technical as we review the grant application. So since we're all on Zoom, maybe you are stretching now. But there we go. Let's do that and take a deep breath, because this is, as we know from grant applications, the devil's in the detail, and I'm going to try and not be a devil, but be your angel here to walk us through this process. I also want to mention that, like we do in Impact, we have two co-chairs of each committee, and my colleague is Pat Roshkind. And Pat and I have the absolute pleasure of working with over 70 trained volunteers who are organized into 5 subcommittees. And each of those subcommittees reviews no more than 15 proposals and does a very thoughtful and very intentional review and evaluation, using an outline, because we believe that one aspect of fairness is that everyone is evaluated in a consistent manner. And by using an outline, we can promote consistency. As Jen has mentioned, we really thank though I'm sure there are some on this call who completed the survey that Jen and Cindy sent out to last year's applicants. We took all of your feedback, as well as that from our grant review committee members, and in developing this application for the 2022 cycle. Again, all questions that we will be considering use the data fill entry format in a similar, on a single web page. And some of the questions are very straightforward. What is the name of your executive director, CEO? But for the questions that require a narrative response, we have provided word limits. Again, that can, we believe that having word limits promotes a consistency and then a fairness as we review the applications. So I'm going to review the first three sections. Our first section, general information, we see that up there, the Roman numeral, has very straightforward information that aligns with our eligibility criteria. So that again, we want to have this ask you, are you meeting the eligibility criteria? So that if not, this is not the place for you. All of what we are applying for is a $100,000 grant. Question 2 is much broader this year. Confirm that your program proposal falls into one or more of the 5 categories below. And we ask, you must say yes to be eligible. In the past, those who were doing environmental education said, which box should we check? Doesn't matter. You're covering environment and education. If you're incorporating the arts and culture into a program serving children and families, health, including and wellness, you don't need to be agonizing over which box shall I check. You've covered our focus areas. We also want to know and be assured that your program is serving a population in one or more of the counties whom we serve. I think it's important to mention here that we don't privilege applications that are serving in many counties. We ask what county you're serving in, going to be working in, to make sure you meet the eligibility requirements and to give all of us a little clearer understanding of the focus of the proposal you'll be submitting. So that's why we're asking these 3 questions. And if we could move to the 4th question, here again, these are very short fill questions. The organization name, sometimes you have the name you use is not the legal name. So if that's the case, we'd like to know your legal name, your mailing address, and your URL. We'd also ask you for your EIN number. And of course, having the EIN number assures us that you are a 501c3 organization. So that's why we ask that. And then second, we ask that you certify that the executive director or CEO and board president verify that all the information here is accurate. Now, I think something must have gotten lost because I'm seeing on my screen question 2, provide the organization's mission statement. If you go back to the original the application, we have a very short question here. What is the title? I'm sorry, I missed that. That was my error. The organization contact information. What's new here in 2022 is, along with asking for the executive director and the financial leader of your organization, we would like to know the name of the person whom we should contact if we have any questions about the proposal. When Impact 100 Garden State communicates with any staff member, we always copy the executive director. Some organizations use CEO, but the primary leader of your organization, we always copy him or her. But you may decide it's more efficient to list someone with whom we should have more direct communication with as we better understand the grant. So thank you. Again, in our interest in getting to know your organization, we ask you for your current staffing pattern, the number of paid full-time employees, the number of paid part-time employees, and the number of volunteers. And we also are interested in knowing the current budget for the total organization. Having this information helps us better understand where each nonprofit is coming from and gives us an additional perspective as we review your proposal. So that is why we ask for this information. We'd also like to know, in the past 2 years, what are the top 5 funding sources and the amount, and we enter it in whole numbers. So that, again, our interest here is looking at the support each nonprofit organization is receiving from the broader community. Thank you. And here's where we really want you to go to town. We're allowing, I think, our maximum of 275 words, because we really want to know from you what were your most significant achievements in the past 2 years. We anticipate that most responses will include how they have pivoted the organization has pivoted in this challenging time of the pandemic. And you, in addition to that, because you're all still here, perhaps you have other, most likely you have other accomplishments, and we want to know about what you've achieved in the past 2 years as an organization. And after we've had this understanding of your organization, we then ask for 14 very specific questions about the proposal. First, we ask, what is the program title? Again, it cues us to know what direction or focus you're pursuing. And then we ask for a very brief 25-word maximum description of your program summary. What can wow us as we read each of your proposals? Some people refer to that as their elevator speech. What is your pitch in a very briefly made statement? Our third question is a yes or no answer. Is this application for a new or pilot program, or is the application for expanding an existing program? And we ask you to check either one of those boxes. Again, Impact 100 Garden State does not privilege one response over the other, but knowing whether this is a new program or an expansion, again, gives us a better understanding of the scope and purpose of your proposal. Question 4 is similar to what we had in the past, but we tried to be clearer in the question. What is or are the specific unmet needs the proposed program will address? Include a description of the target population you plan to serve. And we ask that you use data that is specific to your target population. We're less interested in national data, but what's happening in your community. And we're not looking for high sophisticated statistical analysis. If you say we want to expand this program because we have a very large waiting list, and tell us what the size of the waiting list is, that tells us that there's an unmet need. If one of the organizations with whom you collaborate, such as a school or health setting, is telling you we have this increased need, or we are identifying an underserved population, that kind of information at the grassroots local agency level is the kind of information we're interested in your telling us about. Again, we're not interested in your referencing national statistics. And the response to this question has a 100-word maximum. Question 5 asks you to describe how you will use the Impacts Garden State funding. And again, 100-word maximum. So tell us, do you want to hire certain qualified staff? Do you want to purchase some equipment, make some remodeling of existing structures in order to achieve your proposed better to serve the target population you've identified? Tell us in very straightforwardly where the impact money will go, how you will use it to achieve your goals. And our 6th question follows from question 5. We want to know what steps you'll take to implement the program and what is the timeline for taking these steps. This is a 75-word maximum, so please use bullet points. And responses to this question will tie in to how grants administration will work with the recipients of the $100,000 grants. So if you say in the first quarter, we want to hire the new staff, then that cues grants administration to say, this is the kind of money you'll need. If you need to do staff trainings, whatever it is, so give us a timeline that can be used with grants administration for allocation of the grant, $100,000 grant. I thank the person who asked about location and the 5 counties. Excellent question. We are interested in proposals that serve the residents of Morris, Sussex, Somerset, Passaic, and/or Union County. Organizations could be headquartered anywhere, as long as the services funded by this Impact 100 Garden State money are going to serve people in one of our 5 counties. Please apply. We're not interested in your headquarters. We're interested in where you're going to serve. Our 7th question of the 14 in the grant application asks applicants to tell us what are the expected outcomes of the program for the target population. Do you expect reading levels to improve? Do you expect frail elderly to increase their socialization opportunities? Are you striving to achieve certain health goals, certain growth in a community? addressing some aspect of environmental degradation. Tell us what you expect and what success would look like for the target population. We've added the 8th question because our review teams were saying some applicants did this and some didn't. So we want to, again, treat everyone and give everyone the opportunity to fully respond to the factors we consider important. So we've added this question, and that is, what will there be additional positive impacts beyond the target population? If so, please describe. If none, please so note. So that here we're really asking you whether you anticipate there may be some ripple effects or contribution to the field of philanthropy. When we have read some proposals, the applicant has said, we're serving parents, but when we serve parents, children benefit in these ways. Or when we take on this initiative, there is a broader neighborhood community benefit. If these are examples, but if anything I'm saying resonates, please expand on these ideas in your response to question 8. In other instances, and sometimes this has come up at the site visit, it hasn't even been in the application, nonprofits will tell us what we're doing is somewhat innovative. Not many nonprofits are using this model. We want to, when we're successful, we want to promote this and have the data to show. If this example resonates with you, please take the opportunity in question 8 to briefly make the point here. With regard to, and question 9 ties into questions 7 and 8. And question 9 asks, how will you evaluate your proposed program? Describe the data to be collected to evaluate the outcomes and the degree of program success. Also identify the persons responsible for collecting and evaluating the data. Here, we want to know what kind of information you'll collect. Are you in the example I gave about reading scores, are you going to use teacher evaluations, some standardized test, whatever it is? If you're looking at opportunities for socialization among the elderly, what kind of evidence are you going to collect there? We're also interested, if you're doing an employment program, you're expecting people to get a job or to get the credentials to get a job. The second part of this question asks you to identify what will be your benchmark, your criterion for concluding success. If you are working with a high-risk population, it's very unlikely to achieve 100% success. What level, how many persons, what proportion of your target population needs to achieve the expected outcomes for you to conclude that the program was a success? We're very interested in first seeing that you have a criterion established, and secondly, what your rationale is for establishing that criterion. And then thirdly, we're interested in knowing that you've identified a person or persons to conduct the evaluation. If the person who will have that responsibility will be hired with impact funding, that's fine. Just that each nonprofit is has a clear understanding of who will assume responsibility for the evaluation. We're interested in that piece of information. And 10 asks for the proposed staffing for the program. It's a 50-word max, so you would say outreach worker, and then what the credential is for that person. Community experience, bachelor's, GED, whatever it is. Nurse, whatever it is. And then, so everyone should be listed here, including consultants. And then later, and my colleague Mary Jane Robertson will mention this, every person who's identified in question 10 as part of the proposed staffing needs to have a budget line in the budget. And this year, it's a spoiler alert, but we've prepared a template that we've tested out. And I think that having that template can be very helpful for many of our applicants. But again, be sure to make that every person identified here has a corresponding line in the budget that you prepare. Our 11th question is very straightforward, and that is, what is the total, question 11, what is the total proposed budget for the program, including the Impact 100 Garden State program? Some applicants operate a program solely with impact funds. So here the total proposed budget would be $100,000. Other programs are taking the impact funding and supplementing our grant with other sources of income. If that's the situation of your proposal, you would then indicate a higher number than $100,000. Now we have question 12. Okay, question 12 mentions the requirements for a budget that has to be in PDF format. And Mary Jane will walk you through that after I conclude. The two questions that remain on the narrative of the application that use the data fill entry format don't apply to every application, but are very important for many. And the first of these questions is relates to what we're calling other entities. If your proposed program requires formal permission from an other entity, such as a school district, such as a healthcare setting, such as a municipal authority, such as law enforcement, we want to know that in order to implement your program, you have to go into the school. You have to work with a local hospital. You have to work with the police, whatever it is. And so you identify those organizations in this box. If you are selected for a site review, we will ask you to have we will advise you of that by mid-March. And then by no later than the end of April, we're to advance to a finalist. The applicants would have to have in hand and send to us a memorandum of agreement saying that ABC School District is willing to partner with you. We'll let you into the schools to provide your service, that the hospital, whoever it is that with whom you will be collaborating, needs to be identified here in question 13. And our final question is, and it applies to typically only a few applicants who submit a joint application. A joint application is one where two or more nonprofits are going to each receive funding from us directly. we've had a couple of examples of that, but not many. And so if you are submitting a joint application, we ask for the names of the two. Well, you provided one. What's the name of the other organization? And then the financial contact person. And then in the box of 75 words, give us a sense of which organization will perform which activities. And we will follow up with those joint applications in another way. Thank you for the question in the toolbox. We're asking for one application per nonprofit. We appreciate your ambition, but we do limit it to one application per nonprofit. Our 15th question is that, again, we are asking you to certify that everything that is written here is true, accurate, and complete. And that's it. Before I turn over the mic, I wanted to respond. I know we had a question in the chat about, or a conversation Jennifer picked up on videography. For the finalists, we offer a professional videographer to give you produce for each of you a 4-minute video. And prior to having the videographer come to a designated spot, and people get there, and we do everything in the day, in a single day, we have a dress rehearsal where we provide some feedback so that you can focus your remarks at a level where we feel that our members can best understand what all the good work you want to do. So again, we're mindful that not everyone has the resources for videographing. We had another question from Philip Keefe. Is there a maximum organization budget size that exceeds your willingness to fund? No, we don't. This time we don't have any cap on the organization's budget. So now I will turn the program over to Mary Jane Robertson, who is going to talk about the budget in her capacity as the chair of the Financial Review Committee.
Thank you, Louise. And hello, everyone. My name is Mary Jane Robertson, and I'm a member of the Financial Review Committee. I'll be reviewing the most exciting part of the application, the budget and the financial statements. So let's start with the budget, which is up here on the screen as an example. But first, let me tell you what we're looking for in the way of a budget. It's actually a very important part of the application. And those of us that will be reviewing it are looking for 4 characteristics. First, we're looking for a budget that is consistent with the program as you have described it in your application. We often receive budgets that don't really square with the program as it has been described. Second, the budget must be sufficient for the program that was presented. Again, sometimes we see budgets that are missing one or more elements that in our view are necessary to achieve the program goals as outlined in the application. Third, the budgets must be achievable. We may see a budget that includes all the required elements, but we, for our part, have concerns about the achievability of the budget, be it an element of revenue or an element of expense. Finally, fourth, it needs to be clear and accurate. Now, this almost goes without saying that this is very important, but when we see a sloppy or inaccurate budget, if there are typos or the numbers don't add up, it does not reflect well on the management of the organization. So the example budget on this slide is illustrative only. We're not requiring that this format be followed precisely, but we do expect that the budget that you submit will include the key features that are in this example, and most importantly, will provide sufficient level of detail to allow our reviewers to fully understand how you are proposing to spend our $100,000 grant. So let's walk through the example of the exhibit on this slide. First, please present the budget in a chart form like this and whole dollars, no pennies, please. We've assumed in this example that your program budget exceeds $100,000, $175,000 was assumed. And if your budget does not exceed 100,000 and it's just 100,000, you can obviously omit that first column total program budget and simply present the Impact 100 budget request of $100,000 over 1, 2, or 3 years. So starting with the revenues, the total revenue, of course, should add up to the total program budget, as it does in this case, 175,000. And the total revenue for the impact budget request line should, of course, be $100,000. If your program budget does exceed 100,000, you need to show the other sources of funds that get to the total program budget and indicate parenthetically or in the comments whether those funds are in hand or committed or potential. If a funding source is noted as potential, it'd be helpful to us if you noted in your comments the approximate date by which you expect to hear back from the potential funder. So turning to expenses, you have a similar thing, of course. The total expenses should add up to the total program budget, in this case, 175,000, and the total expenses for the impact budget should be $100,000. Now, personnel costs are often a significant portion of the total budget. One of the issues we frequently encounter is the personal expenses in the budget are not consistent with the staffing plan that Louise discussed under question 10. As Louise mentioned in item 10, we ask you to identify the staff that will be involved in the program. And in the budget, we ask you to list the dollar amount of the salary that is being allocated to the program for each staff member identified in item 10. So we are going to expect to see each staff member that's in item 10 in the budget, and we don't expect to see any staff members that aren't in item 10 in the budget. So in this illustration, your application would have said that Mary, John, and Bill are the individuals that are going to be working on the program. And the budget line for each of these individuals should include their name and or title, just so that we can tie them to item 10, and also indicate the percent of each individual's time or salary that is being allocated to the program in total. So in this case, we've assumed Mary, who is the ED, her salary is $100,000, and she will spend 10% of her time on the program. So there's a $10,000 allocation to the program. For John, his salary is assumed to be $60K, and he'll be spending 100% of his time. He's the program manager, and he'll be spending 100% of his time on the program. So all $60,000 is in the program budget. Bill's salary, a driver, is $35,000, and he'll be spending 80% of his time on the program. So $28,000 of his salary gets allocated to the program. Now, in addition to staff costs, of course, we expect to see other expenses itemized in detail by category, including a reasonable allocation of overhead. 2 or 3 lines of expense detail is not going to be sufficient. We expect to see more than that. And remember to include any capital expenditures that you have included in your proposed program. We don't fund overhead per se, but we recognize that a program may consume resources such as rent, utilities, technology, and insurance. So a reasonable allocation of those expenses is perfectly acceptable. So one last thing on this slide, you may have noticed that the budget includes the salary of a driver, but there are no costs associated with operating a vehicle, such as gas or maintenance or whatever. I just put this in as sort of a, that's the kind of thing that we will question when we look at a budget like this. So we want to be sure that you should be sure to include any expected accompanying costs that would go with other costs associated with the program. Next slide, please. So this slide is actually an excerpt from the application. It's the description of the financial statements that are required to be provided. My committee, the Financial Review Committee, conducts a thorough review of the financial condition of the applicants that are proposed by our grant review teams for site visits. And we need the following information, financial information for our review. We need 2 years of audited or reviewed financials. Compiled financial statements are not acceptable. And just as an aside, for the rest of this presentation, when I refer to audited, I mean audited or reviewed. So in addition to the audited financials, we require unaudited interim financials from the date of the last audited balance sheet to the most recent interim date available, preferably December 31, 2021 in this year. And whether it's an audited annual financial statements or whether it's unaudited interims, a full set of financials includes a balance sheet, a P&L, and a statement of cash flow. One of the first things the Financial Review Committee does after the applications are submitted is check that the required financial statements have been submitted. And we usually don't have issues with the completeness of the audited financials. I mean, those are official documents that are prepared every year by your accountants in a prescribed format. So they tend to be, complete and accurate. Where we have issues every year with a large percentage of our applicants, unfortunately, is with the completeness of the unaudited interim financials. So we're hoping the chart on the next slide will clarify for you our interim financial requirements. So this chart shows the required financial statements for 3 common fiscal year ends: June, September, and December. And the first column, the attachment column, aligns with the required attachments that Jen is going to review in the next slide in terms of what has to be attached. The first prior year audit, the second prior year audit, and the interim financials. Now, we typically find that applicants with a June or an earlier fiscal year end are able to provide their audited financials for the fiscal year ending in the immediately preceding calendar year, i.e. in this case, in 2021. So in such cases, if you're a June or an earlier, you can usually provide your audited financials for 20 and 21. And then all you have to provide is your interims for the period from the last audited balance sheet through the end of December. So June is pretty straightforward. Likewise, December in a different way is straightforward. We would not expect any or very few applicants would be able to provide their December 31st, 2021 audits. So an applicant with a December year end would provide your 2020 audit, your 2019 audit, and your interims would be your full year internal financial statements for calendar year 2021. Where it gets a little bit complicated is for fiscal periods ended like in September, where your audited financials for 2021 may not be available. So in those cases, we actually need 2 sets of unaudited information. So let's just walk through September 30 quickly. If your September audit is available, and some of you it will be, then it's like June. You'll provide your 2021 audit, your 2020 audit, and your unaudited internal financials from October to December of 2021. However, if your 2021 audit is not available, then you'll submit your 2020 audit, your 2019 audit, your full year internal financial statements for the year ended September 30, 2021, and your interim internals from October 2021 or October 1st, 2021 to December 31st, 2021. Now, often what we find in terms of completeness is that it's not that an applicant misses an entire period, but rather that 1 or 2 of the required statements for an interim period is missing. For example, in the case of September, the applicant might provide a balance sheet for October 1, 2021 to December 31, 2021, but not a cash flow statement. In fact, our experience has been that the cash flow statement is the statement that is most often omitted. And it's actually a very important statement for us. So please read the financial requirements carefully. This chart is actually, you can find it under the FAQ on our website. And be sure to coordinate closely with your organization's CFO or financial director. Now, as we say in our application, the failure to provide the required financial statements may be a grounds for disqualification. However, we are reluctant to disqualify applicants on that basis, and we will contact your financial person and request the missing information. But we won't be happy about it. And we will take note that the information that we requested was not initially provided. So thank you, everybody, for listening. I appreciate it. And the financial team of Impact 100 Garden State looks forward to reviewing your applications.
Thanks so much, Mary Jane. And again, this helpful table is available under our FAQ webpage through that grants menu on our website. Thanks for everyone's attention and time. I see we're getting really close to 1:30, so we want to get to as many of your questions as possible. Let me just close us out here kind of with the nitty-gritty in terms of those attachments that Mary Jane spoke to a bit here. You'll see, and again, if you've applied in the past, after you've completed all that data fill form entry, then you will see that you can upload your required attachments, which again includes your program budget, that C3 letter, the list of board members, and we also like to see some description of their professional affiliation and years served. So again, sometimes we see that the board member names may be listed, but a little blurb about who they are and their skill set is helpful for our review teams. Your most recent 990, including Schedule A, and as Mary Jane just spoke to, the first prior year financials, second, and then the unaudited, unreviewed financials, and that table can help you there given those typical fiscal years. All right. And then once you've spent your time and talent on that application package, you've saved your programmatic responses, you've got the attachments uploaded, be sure to save. You'll see there's also a nice reminder on the site to continue to save, and it shows how much time you have remaining between your last save and your work. So just go ahead and remember to save. You'll then submit. If you're missing any information, there will be red highlighted cells if the cell data is missing, or a red asterisk by any missing attachments. So that should be really clear. We hope that it is. Given that you've saved and submitted successfully, you're going to see on the website this pop-up of thank you for submitting your application, and you can log out of the platform. In your inbox, whatever email you use to register and apply, you will also receive confirmation that your application has been received. If you think you've saved and submitted and you haven't seen either of these confirmations, reach us as soon as possible at that grants email, grants@impact100gardenstate.org. All right. So thanks again for your time. I want to just speak to a few of the questions that have come in, and we promise you that in the follow-up communication, oh, excuse me, my PowerPoint's running away from me. Here we go. In that follow-up communication, we will share the answers to your questions, some of which were asked directly to me or other colleagues, or in the chat to everyone. So let's see, I think we're past time, we're at 1:30. For those who can stay on, let me just quickly go over some of what's come in. Again, to Louise's earlier mention, as long as your request targets those within one of our 5 counties, even if you're headquartered elsewhere, and you meet our other requirements, you're eligible to apply. Someone asked about funding renovations. If the renovation costs are directly tied, again, if you meet all of our requirements in all other ways, and the renovation costs are directly tied to that new program or expansion, and we have an understanding of why this is important and not part of a capital campaign, then that should be eligible. And if you have more particular questions, you can reach grants@impact100gardenstate.org and brainstorm with us some more. Again, one project request per organization. We saw a question about whether joint applications were weighted or weighed in favor or greater favor than solo applications. They are not. We do not have a preference in that regard. Our scoring really speaks to each of the items that Louise went over and our funding priorities. We don't give greater weight to one sort of request, whether that's in terms of focus areas or in terms of a individual application or a joint application. There also was a question from grant writers, consultants who may be preparing applications for multiple organizations. Our system is such that you will need a unique ID and password for each application. The system just doesn't allow us to be secure and sophisticated enough to know that one individual should have access to multiple requests. So you will have to have unique ID and passwords. And again, if we want to think that through some more, you have some more technical questions, please reach me at grants@impact100gardenstate.org, and I can connect you with our IT folks too if we want to think that through some more. But current status is you're going to have unique access to each application. There also was a question about sharing applicant names with folks, and we're not able to do that. We haven't asked permission to do that, and we don't yet know what that pool looks like. So we're unable to do that. But in terms of the question about prior grants made, on our website, we have a tab that says grant recipients. You can go into that tab and there is a list of all of the awards we've made since 2013 with program descriptions, as well as a map in terms of where they're located, and you can get a sense of the nature of the projects. Also remember that every year our membership base is different. We have many who renew, of course, but it may help you to consider our group a new group each year that you apply, because we have new members, new requests coming in, and we have a diverse membership base, some of whom have lots of experience in the nonprofit sector, some of whom have less. So I would treat us as eager to hear your ideas and your explanations for the cases that you make for funding. Let me see, I think there were some other partnerships are eligible. We had a award made where there were 3 hunger organizations working together. So we just need that lead organization stipulated in the request, and we will need financials from all of the partners if they are receiving the grant dollars directly. But certainly other collaborations where there's just the lead partner doing the bulk of the work and working in partnership, as Louise spoke to, that's also eligible. I think those were the big ones. We'll go through again and we'll make sure in that follow-up communication that you have access to this recording, as well as our responses to your excellent questions. And thanks so much for your time. We know this is a lot, and we appreciate your patience and your interest in our process. Colleagues, any other final comments, words of wisdom, or things we want to emphasize before we say farewell? Oops, Louise, you're muted.
We hope you all apply and pledge to give your proposal a very careful and thoughtful reading. Thank you.
For those who are still here and willing to take that final poll, we'd love to kind of just get a pulse of the likelihood that you'll apply. Oh, thanks for everyone sticking around a little past 1:30. Oh, this is great to see.